All right, holiday break is over. That means we are back with more Formula One content. It is officially 2025, the first episode of the Podium Pushers in 2025. But that doesn't mean that we're done talking about 2024. Welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast with Justin and Brandon. Today, we are here to grade every driver's performance from the 2024 season. We're giving them a report card score today. We've got your fan scores as well. Brandon, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I'm excited to be back recording podcasts together in 2025. And I'm excited to look back on the 2024 season and see what we think about these drivers, see what the fans thought about the drivers. Do we think the same things? Do the fans think the same things as we do? We're about to find out. It's going to be great.
We are about to find out, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. I haven't seen cars on track in like a month. I've got a lot of caffeine in my system, so let's just see what happens. Starting with the Haas drivers, Kevin Magnussen finished the year 15th in the standings with 16 points. I've given him a C. He started the year out okay, had a couple drives that helped the team score points by driving like an absolute maniac to help Nico Hulkenberg score, then earned himself a race ban, and then came back from the race ban and was actually fairly good for the end of the year. Scored a lot less points than his teammate did, but still had a solid year. I think he is deserving of the C.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. I also gave Kevin a C. Like you said, he started out the year um, pretty hot, I guess you could say, hot for a Haas driver, at least doing what he can to help the team score some points. Kind of had a big slump in the middle of the season, and then after his race ban, he did pick things back up. Had a few great races there at the end of the season, and yeah, so a lot of highs, a lot of lows for Kevin. I think it averages out to a C.
The fans were more impressed than we were. They gave Kevin Magnussen a B, which seems a little much for me, but I will allow it. It is your opinion. Nico Hulkenberg finished the year 11th in the standing with 41 points, so solidly outperformed his teammate. I think he deserves an A. I really can't think of anything more that Nico Hulkenberg could have done in that Haas. Was a fairly consistent point scorer, and when he wasn't scoring points, it felt like he was finishing 11th. He finally had a car that could live up to his qualifying performances on Saturday. It was actually good on Sundays too. So good year from Nico. Kind of sad that he's about to go to the slowest car on the grid after a very consistent year for him, but I'm going to give him an A.
I agree with that as well. I'm also giving Nico an A. I think this season really proved to me, in my mind, that Nico is, I mean, maybe not a top tier driver, but he is a very, very good driver, very fast. I always thought after his time at Renault that maybe, I feel like he should have gotten more out of the car at times. And I thought it was an interesting, signing to bring him back when Haas brought him back. But I think he really outperformed the car, outperformed his teammate, and did a lot of good things for Haas. And I think that, um, you know, right now it looks like Haas is on the up and up, and I think a lot of that is due to Nico Hulkenberg's season this year. So, an A from me.
Yeah, the fans gave him a B, so not as high on Nico Hulkenberg as we were. Ollie Behrman finished the year 18th in the standings with 7 points. I put him in Haas because he completed more races for Haas than he did Ferrari, but he is kind of a double up. Also, only had 3 races. He had 2 really good races. His race with Ferrari and then his race at Baku with Haas. Those were really good. Would probably give him an A performance. And then in Brazil, he did not have that great of a race, but it was in the rain, first time in those conditions, and it was like monsoon rain. So I can't fully blame him for that. I think it was a good year from Ollie with the sample size we had, so I think a B is fair.
Yeah, I'm gonna surprise agree with that again. Like you said, we didn't have a lot of time to look at Ollie, but what kind of pulls him up to a B for me is just the fact that he jumped in at Saudi for Ferrari and had uh, probably his best race of the season, and he had no time in that car to prepare essentially, and that's one of the fastest and most difficult tracks to race any vehicle on, I would imagine, let alone a Formula One car. So those corners come at you so fast. He did such a great job, scored valuable team points for Ferrari when they really needed it.
Yeah, I feel like that drive alone probably guaranteed him his seat on the grid for the next year. And so I'm really excited to see him in 2025 full time in that house. I think he has a lot of potential. The fans agree. They gave him a B as well. I am sure we will disagree with each other at some point. Sauber, Zhou Guan Yu finished the year in 20th with 4 points. I've given him a D, even though he scored the team's only points. Outside of that, I felt like he was wholeheartedly outperformed by Valtteri Bottas. Had a pretty lackluster year outside of the sprint in China and him scoring points. I really, off the top of my head, cannot think of a single thing that Zhou Guan Yu did. And so, not a great year. Probably his last year in Formula One ever, as he's not on the grid next year. So, D for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a D as well. I was debating whether or not to change it on the fly, but I think I'm gonna stick with the D. He did score some points that was valuable for Sauber. Yeah, just not a great season from him. I know that car was slow, but I feel like the times that he had an opportunity to do something, he ended up not really doing anything with that opportunity. So not a great year from Joe.
Yeah, I felt like there was like 5 races in a row where he was like P20 in qualifying by like a second and a half. So not a great year for him. The fans gave him a B, so maybe they just think that Sauber was so bad that he was doing the best he could with it. Valtteri Bottas finished the year in 22nd with 0 points. I've given him a C, even though he finished the year lower in the standings than his teammate. I felt like he was more consistent, was he outperformed Joe across the course of the year, so I have to give him a higher grade. He's getting a C. Wasn't a great year from Valtteri, but it is worthy of a C, worthy of being higher than Joe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also gave him a C. I think that he did a decent job given the car that he had. I feel like in qualifying especially, he was far more consistent than Joe. And, unfortunately he didn't score any points, but I think that consistency is kind of what Valtteri brings to the table. So a C for me.
And who knows? Maybe we'll see him in a Mercedes race seat for a race next year. Probably not, but maybe. The fans gave him a B, so same grade as Guan Yu Zhou. A little higher than we did, but I'll allow it. Visa Cash App RB, starting with Liam Lawson, finished the year in 21st with 4 points. I have given him a C, and this was one of the harder grades for me to give. He started his return to Formula One on fire, had an incredible race in Coda. We saw it live. It was an incredible drive to score points on his re-debut. But then if you do the math, he scored the exact same amount of points as Daniel Ricciardo across the races he was in and was outqualified by Yuki Tsunoda 6-0. So if you look at it, maybe it wasn't the greatest 6 race stint from Liam Lawson, but also didn't have the full season and it was enough to get him the Red Bull drive. So I can't criticize him too much, I guess. But I'm gonna give him a C because even though he got in some tussles, made some good overtakes, it wasn't the perfect return to Formula One, but it is deserving of a C.
Yeah, I've given Liam a B. I think that, considering the circumstances, I think he did a great job. It was obviously a very drama-filled start to his re-debut in Formula One. He didn't know a lot about what he was going to be doing until it was kind of happening. Um, and then, it seems like every single weekend, Liam Lawson was a storyline, whether that was if he was going to replace Checo or replace Daniel or how was he doing, that kind of thing. And I think under all that pressure, he performed well. I'm giving him a B, kind of a benefit of the doubt. He did have a couple of good drives there at the end of the season, a couple of bad drives, but I'm giving him a B. I think that this next year, with maybe a little bit less pressure, a little bit less time in the spotlight, hopefully he'll be able to perform well with a much better car too.
The fans agree with you. They gave him a B as well. You think he's going to have less pressure going to Red Bull up against Max Verstappen?
I know that that's a crazy thing to say. Maybe not less pressure, but maybe a little bit more certainty, I guess. He knows that, hey, I'm a Red Bull driver for at least this weekend, probably next weekend. So
Yeah.
maybe a little more consistency will help him. I don't know.
Yeah, a different kind of pressure. Pressure where you at least have a baseline to go off of. I mean, I can imagine that it is difficult to drive not knowing if you will be driving 3 races from now when this stint goes up, but actually saying, okay, I have a contract, I'm at this team, at least has somewhere to go from. So the pressure will be a different form. I am excited to see how Liam Lawson does. Yuki Tsunoda finished 12th in the standings with 30 points. I've given Yuki a B, and this was another hard grade for me. I'll be honest, all the V-Carb drivers, incredibly hard for me to grade. Yuki has the same season path every single year. He starts off great, he has this weird slump, and then he scores some more points at the end of the year. Um, I think he had a fairly good year. I think he made the most of the beginning of the year when that V carb was its fastest compared to everyone else. That car was horrible by the end of the year. So I'm kind of giving Yuki some benefit of the doubt here with giving him my B.
Yeah, I've given Yuki a C, kind of for those same reasons. I just think that, Yuki's been in the sport for quite a few years now. And one thing I feel as though he has developed quite a bit as a driver. But one thing that he hasn't developed is consistency. And I feel like that's really what is going to propel him to another level when he can get more consistent weekend to weekend. And I think the big teams will actually start looking at him. But if he opts in the car and you never really know what you're going to get, that's, I think, one thing that's kind of held him out from a higher tier seat. So I've given Yuki a C just because of his inconsistency throughout the season. But hopefully we'll see more consistency next season. I mean, I like Yuki. I hope he does well.
Yeah, well, the fans agree with me this time. They gave him a B as well. Daniel Ricciardo finished the year in 17th with 12 points. Obviously, did not race the full season. I gave him a C. It's painful for me to do, uh, but he just didn't have the year that we thought he would. He definitely did not live up to expectations. There were some high moments, like the sprint in Miami, but there were many low moments as well. You could make the argument that it was unfair that he was dropped if you included sprints and sprint qualifyings. He was pretty much dead even with Yuki, if not beating him a little bit. So you could argue that him being dropped was unfair, but clearly he did not live up to expectations, and perhaps it was time to get someone younger with more potential in that seat. And so I have to give Daniel Ricciardo a C.
I've gone with giving Daniel a B. I mean, maybe this is just my allegiance to Daniel speaking, but I really think that Daniel performed well despite all the circumstances. Kind of the same pressure that was on Liam was on Daniel like every single weekend. And, I can imagine that it's difficult to go out there and perform really well when literally everyone around you is talking about how you're probably not going to be here very much longer. And I mean, this started way earlier in the season, than his exit at Singapore even happened. And then there was so many strong rumors that he was going up to the Red Bull seat. So with all the highs and lows off of the track, I think Daniel did fairly well for that. So I've given him a B. Um, I don't know, maybe more benefit of the doubt there, but I think he had an okay season. It's unfortunate that we probably won't see him around the paddock anymore. Um, but we'll miss him for sure.
Yeah, I do miss Daniel Ricciardo very much. If it was your allegiance giving him a B, then the fans giving him an A plus has to be an absurd we miss Daniel Ricciardo grade. But I will allow it because it is for Danny Rick. Another part-time driver, Franco Colapinto, finished the year in 19th with 5 points. I've given him a B. Maybe this is a little too high based on the amount of times he put that Williams in the wall at the end of the year, but he was just a rookie, didn't have a full year, came into the sport on fire, and that is still kind of my lasting impression of Franco Colapinto. So I think it was a solid debut from him, put himself on the map, gets a B from me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think Franco really came out swinging, and um, that's really hard to do in Formula One. It's just such a fast-paced, tough, cutthroat environment, and Franco really kind of immediately rose to the standard. He did have some bad races there at the end, had some big crashes that definitely did not help the team out. But you gotta give him a little bit of grace as he is just a rookie, still learning. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, it was probably the right call to get Logan Sargent out of the car, and give someone else a chance. And I think that Franco did the most with that opportunity.
Yeah, the fans agree. Gave Franco Colapinto a B. Alex Albon finished the year in 16th place with 12 points. I gave him a B as well. I don't really know what to think about Alex Albon right now. He has potentially been a bad teammate merchant. He has potentially not been a bad teammate merchant. And you could put Usain Bolt up against a bunch of fifth graders and he would crush them. And it could be, yeah, he just beat a bunch of fifth graders. That doesn't change the fact that he's a world-class sprinter. Or you could put me up against a bunch of fifth graders, and just because I beat him doesn't mean I could beat a world-class sprinter. So I don't know what to think about Alex Albon until we see him up against Carlos Sainz next year. Maybe that Williams was just a terrible car and he got the most out of it. Or maybe he was matched by Franco Colapinto and his teammates have just been so bad that Alex Albon has looked like Max Verstappen 2.0 in that Williams. But I still think it was a good enough year to warrant a B from me for Alex Albon.
I've gone with a C. I feel like Alex really kind of uh, didn't meet expectations um, this year, and I think just didn't kind of wow me like we thought he was going to. So I've given him a C. I don't really know honestly what to think of Alex either. Um, I think this next year is going to be really, really telling. So I'm excited to see him up against Carlos Sainz, but should be a good year next year for them both.
Yeah, I do agree that Alex Albon did not live up to expectations as much as we thought he would. So maybe my B was generous. The fans agree with you, gave him a C. Logan Sargent finished the year in 23rd with 0 points, not last, but I have to give him a D. Not a great year from Logan. Put that thing in the wall many a time, scored no points. Did have his best weekend on July 4th at the British Grand Prix, but still did not score points. And it was obvious from the first time Franco was in the car that it was good they replaced him. So can't give him any higher than a D, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I'm going to change this one on the fly. I'm going to give Logan an F. I think it was a really bad season from him. I think he was marginally better from last year, but the amount of crashes is just monumental, honestly. And I just think he was hurting Williams for quite some time there. So I'm giving Logan an F. As much as I love, that he was an American driver on the grid, and I love his helmet and, the pride in my country that he gave me, but I just don't think he did a great job. I'm giving him an F.
Poor Logan. If it's any consolation when he listens to this, the fans gave him a C, so he's at least got that going for him. Jack Doohan, our last part-time driver, finished the year 24th in the standings with 0 points. I'm going to give him a C, which is the same grade I gave him from Abu Dhabi because that's all we've got to go on. It wasn't horrible. It wasn't good. He didn't put it in the wall. He kept out of Pierre Gasly's way. Solid first race weekend. Sets him up well for next year, I think. C from me.
Yeah, I totally agree. We don't have a lot to go on with Jack, but it wasn't his worst weekend, I don't think, and it wasn't the greatest weekend ever in Abu Dhabi. But I think it was a good opportunity for him to get his toes in the water, see what a race weekend is like, and I think he'll do better with a full off season of prep and everything. More training and all that to hit the ground running this season. So
Well, categorically, it was his best and worst weekend in Formula One because it is his only weekend in Formula One. So just putting that out there. The fans gave him a D, so they were a little harsher on him than we were. Pierre Gasly finished the year in 10th with 42 points. Maybe this is some recency bias, but I have to give him an A. I don't care. The turnaround he had, the way he ended that year, in my mind, warrants an A. To finish top 10 in the standings on where that tractor started the year has to be one heck of a turnaround. And I know that he didn't start the year off the strongest and was behind Esteban Ocon for a little bit at the beginning of the year. But as the upgrades rolled in, the tide started to turn back to Pierre Gasly's favor. And then the podium and the consistent top sevens to end the year. would have had scored even more points if he didn't go too fast in Las Vegas that he made the engine explode. So I think he warrants an A, at least for how he ended the year, if not the whole year. But I will allow recency bias to affect my answer in this one because I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, Alpine was easily the slowest car at the beginning of the year, and for Pierre to finish 10th in the driver standings is huge. I think he uh obviously worked really hard and probably had quite a bit of influence on where that car was going. I think with the way he was driving it at the end of the year, just kind of showed that a little bit, but amazing drives from him at the end of the season. Took the most of the opportunity in Brazil to score that podium. And, it was a great year from him. I'm really excited to see kind of with him being the number one driver at Alpine next year, where he can lead them. Um, I'm expecting him to have a big year next year, and I'm expecting Alpine to honestly be quite a bit faster next year. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, if this is their starting point, then surely they'll be faster than they were at the beginning of last year. The fans agree. They gave Pierre Gasly an A. Esteban Ocon finished the year in 14th with 23 points. As far as recency bias goes, my last memory of Esteban Ocon is him getting mollywopped by Pierre Gasly and then getting dropped. So I'm gonna try to not let that affect my grade and give him a B. He did outperform Pierre Gasly at the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, that car was a dustbin for the beginning of the year, so he scored no points to show for it. He did get that P2 in Brazil, almost won the dang thing if it wasn't for Max Verstappen. So I have to give him a lot of points for that. I think it was a good year for Esteban considering where that car was, but not a great year. So I'm going to stick with a B.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that kind of Pierre's great year in that car kind of bumps Esteban down to a B for me because I think with how that car was at the end of the year, he could have done more. And Pierre was getting the most out of the car and Esteban was not. So I've given him a B as well. Um, I think it was a decent year from him. I think his driving definitely warranted him keeping a seat in Formula One. I'm excited to see what he can do at Haas. Um, so I think that a B is a fair grade for him.
The fans must think it was a fair grade as well because they gave him a B, just like us. Aston Martin Lance Stroll finished the year in 13th with 24 points. Solid D. I don't have anything to say about Lance Stroll really, and I don't know if it's just because in my mind Lance Stroll just exists or if he just really didn't do anything noteworthy this year. But way less points than Fernando Alonso. Was outperformed almost every single weekend. So just a D from me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like Lance had maybe a slightly better year than last year. I feel like he was not making as many headlines, which is a good thing because usually when Lance was making headlines, it was like, oh, Lance crashed in qualifying again. Which, it's never a good thing. But yeah, kind of just middle of the road year for Lance Stroll. It's what I've kind of become accustomed to from him. So we'll continue to see what happens year over year from Lance Stroll, but I expect more of it next year. And yeah, kind of playing second fiddle to Fernando there.
Hey, second or same amount of podiums this year as he had last year, though. So the fans gave Lance Stroll an F. Fernando Alonso finished the year in ninth with 70 points. I gave him a B. I don't think it was as good of a year as he had last year. I think there were a couple instances you maybe saw Fernando Alonso's age catching up to him. But it was still a good year. You would imagine every weekend he was getting the most out of that car. I can't confirm it, but he just gets that benefit of the doubt for me because of how good of a driver he is. So I'm going to give him a B.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think Fernando had a fantastic year. Given the circumstances, I'm really, really excited to see what they can do over the next couple of years. I think 26 and 27 are going to be great years for Aston Martin. But I think 2025 also has the potential to be a great year with Adrian Newey having some influence on that car. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited to see what he does in 2025 and a B in 2024 for me.
Yeah, there's like a 30% chance that Adrian Newey shows up on his first day of work with an entire stack of drawings and they're just all dated on that day, but he's been working on it for like the entire year that he's been absent from Red Bull. Uh, I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm just saying what might happen. The fans gave Fernando Alonso a C. McLaren, Oscar Piastri finished the year in fourth with 292 points and two wins. I'm giving him an A. Definitely an improvement on his rookie year. Got his first two wins in the sport. But when you kind of go back and look at it, he was still pretty solidly beat by Lando Norris and did have that slump to end the year. So it's deserving of an A, but I definitely think there's more on the table for Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, I think Oscar deserves an A as well. That's what I've given him. I mean, to come out and score almost 300 points in Formula One season, that's a hard thing to do. And Oscar finishing fourth in the driver's standing, also fantastic. Helping the team win a constructors championship. I mean, that's amazing. So great improvement from Oscar. I think he definitely deserves an A.
The fans agree. They gave him an A as well. Lando Norris finished the year in second with 374 points and four wins. I've given Lando Norris an A plus. I potentially was going to give him an A, but because of how much he beat Oscar by, I have to give him an A plus. Yes, you could argue that he could have won the championship, and even though he did not, it was still his best year in Formula One, won a constructors championship. And it was his first year truly competing for a championship up against Max Verstappen, who is the best driver of our generation. And he wasn't that far off, you know. It never was really within a chance. But for his first time competing at the front, I think he did a fair job. I think we should be looking for him to compete for a championship again next year. But A plus for Lando Norris.
Yeah, I've given Lando an A just because I think that there's still more on the table for Lando, and I think that next year is going to be a big year for him because we're going to have so many drivers competing for a championship next year. Um, and I think Lando had a fantastic year. He took the fight to Max. He was just a little bit inconsistent, left a little too much on the table for an A plus for me. But definitely a better year than Oscar had. And I'm excited to see what he does next year.
The fans agree with you. They gave Lando Norris an A. Carlos Sainz finished the year in fifth with 290 points and two wins. I've given Carlos Sainz an A. I think this was his best year with Ferrari. I think this was his most consistent year. I think he had more of those weekends where he showed up and it was like, oh man, he's on pace with Charles this weekend. He's really up there. Obviously, missing that race in Saudi is probably what kept him from getting fourth in the driver standings. I didn't know the gap was that close until I was looking at it and doing this. So I think it was a great year from Carlos Sainz. An absolute crime that he's going to race in that Williams. He gets an A from me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Two wins on the season for Carlos. Um, especially in Australia, that was a really fun race to watch him win, and just a really consistent year from Carlos, which is exactly what Ferrari needed. So it was a great year from him. Uh, Sad to see him go to Williams, but I really hope that he's able to push them forward and bring them back to the top of the field. Maybe we'll see him on the podium at some point in the future again. Time will tell.
Yeah, maybe in like 2030. The fans agree with us. They gave him an A. Charles Leclerc finished the year in third with 356 points and three wins. A plus, easy. I think this was Charles Leclerc's best year in Formula One. There was a little downturn in the middle of the season. Half of that was because the Ferrari upgrades were horrible and they had the worst strategy calls in the world. And there were some Charles Leclerc mistakes, but I think a lot of that blame falls on Ferrari. But the fact that we were sitting here wondering if he was going to take second place off of Lando Norris after he challenged for a title was insane. We watched him absolutely dominate in Coda, winning at Monza and Monaco in the same year. Great year from Charles Leclerc, honestly, and I think he should be a championship favorite for next year. He gets an A plus from me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Charles had a fantastic year. Um, Watching him race this year, especially when we were at Coda in person, I mean, man, it just kind of made me really, really like Charles. I think he's a fantastic driver. I love that he is locked up with Ferrari for the long term. I think he's going to have a fantastic year next year. And it was just a great season from him. He really also kind of the fact that he and Carlos just had such a consistent season across the board. I mean, that was exactly what Ferrari needed was two drivers that were just so consistent and so fast. And both of them really stepped up this year. And I think an A plus is the only thing that Charles deserves, in my opinion.
Well, tell that to the fans because they gave him an A. George Russell finished the year in sixth with 245 points and two wins. He gets a B. Solid year from George. Kind of hard to gauge because the Mercedes wasn't the greatest car in the world, but I think he took advantage of when that car was fast, finished the year on a high note, and finished ahead of a seven-time world champion. So can't take that away from him. He gets a B from me.
Yep, same here. George had a great season, won two races, um, was able to get the most out of the car when the car was good, and kind of limited damage when the car wasn't. So good season from George.
Yeah, the fans agree, gave him a B as well. Lewis Hamilton finished the year in seventh with 233 points and two wins. I gave Lewis a B as well. Kind of a down year for Lewis. I think his qualifying let him down. I'm interested to see if that was a Mercedes issue or if it's now a Lewis issue. But his race pace on Sundays was just unmatched. I mean, at the end of the year, he had some incredible drives. Winning in Silverstone, obviously a highlight of the year. So not Lewis's best year, but a fairly solid year. I think it's deserving of a B.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, he broke his winless streak, won two races this year. Um, Again, kind of just took advantage of when the car was good. His race pace was fantastic. I agree with you. I think his qualifying did let him down quite a bit, especially towards the end of the season. But yeah, it was a great year from Lewis. And, when we got to see little peaks that of, the fact that Lewis isn't gone. He hasn't changed. He's still got that fire in him. Um, and I'm excited to see that repurposed at Ferrari and see how he does there. It's going
Yeah,
to be great.
it is officially 2025. So Lewis Hamilton is a Ferrari driver as of this moment. Cannot wait to see him in red. The fans gave him a B as well. Sergio Perez. Oh man, finished the year at eighth with 152 points and zero wins. I have a D written down on our sheet. I'll give him an F. I don't care. He's getting an F from me. I just horrible year from Sergio Perez. I mean, just it's an incredible gap to Max Verstappen when you look at it. It is like a 300-point gap. That is absurd. Single-handedly got Red Bull third in the constructors, won the Destructors Championship, I think, was eliminated in Q1 or Q2 pretty much every week. I don't think it could have been worse for Sergio. Like it was a torrid year for him. And so yeah, I'll go with the F.
Yeah, I mean, same here. I have an F written down, and I think that it was just an awful year. I mean, qualifying especially was terrible, and that just put him in bad spots weekend after weekend. And I think a lot of his crashes throughout the season could be attributed to the fact that he was in traffic at the beginning of races, or he was putting himself in bad positions qualifying wise, and he was getting mixed up with cars that he shouldn't get mixed up with, with how fast that Red Bull was. So, I mean, just all around a terrible weekend or terrible weekend. It was all around 24 terrible weekends from Sergio Perez. Um, and, just not a great year from him. An F from me. And, ultimately that led to his replacement. So,
I don't want to discount it. He had a couple of good weekends, got some podiums at the beginning of the year, but it was a steep decline when the decline happened. Clearly something not agreeing with him in that Red Bull, you have to feel bad for Sergio, but it was a very bad year, and we've got to be honest about that here. The fans gave him a D, if that is any consolation. And of course, Max Verstappen, the winner of the World Championship with 437 points and nine wins. It's an A plus. Absolutely dominant at the beginning of the year, minimized the damage when he had to throughout the year, knew the absolute limit of the rules and when to push them to help him win that championship. And then, of course, his late season wins to push him over the edge in that masterclass in Brazil. It can be nothing besides an A plus for Max Verstappen.
yeah, I totally agree with all that. Max did an amazing job this season. He took advantage when his car was the fastest car on the track, and when it wasn't, he limited the damage. Um, yeah, just picked up all the pieces at every single opportunity he could, and a very deserving world champion this year. Max earned it.
He absolutely did. The fans agree, gave him an A plus, and that is it. That is all of our driver grades for the 2024 Formula One season. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast. Thanks for participating by giving us your grades after every single race weekend. You can head over to our social medias and find the form to fill out so we get to hear your voice when it comes to these driver grades. Be sure to follow wherever you're watching or listening, subscribe, leave a review, do all the thing, and head over to our social medias and follow us there. Before we get out of here, Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts?
Parting podium thoughts. First one's at 2025. Man, I'm just excited to get back to recording more podcasts. To the Formula One season, it's coming up faster than you would even think. We're already about halfway through January-ish, and halfway through February about we'll be seeing liveries, and then testing will be here before you know it, and cars are back on track. So I'm excited for this year, excited for the season ahead. So I'm looking forward to it.
The off season is flying by. Cars will be revealed and back on track before you know it. And we're not going anywhere. We will be here for it all with you guys. Thank you so much for all of your support, all you do to help us get to do this. It means the world to us, and we're thankful for each and every person who is behind the screen or lets us be in their ears chatting up Formula One. It means the world. We will see you in the next episode when we start talking about 2025 and all that will entail. But until then, have a great day and God bless.